Welcome to Infinite Novel. Dive into epic alternate realities. All rights to original creators.
Chapter 191, Defeat Hanzo of the Salamander was in a heavy mood. He had just witnessed Jiraiya effortlessly defeat the tailed beast, and the pressure he felt was immense. Hanzo was well aware of how terrifying tailed beasts were. Although Omega Corps did not possess one, their records on these creatures were extensive. Every tailed beast contained an unfathomable amount of power enough to raise entire cities and slaughter thousands of shinobi with ease. Owning a tailed beast had long been Hanzo's dream. If Omega Corps could secure one, the village might rise as a new great nation, no longer subjected to the oppression of the 5 great shinobi countries. However, that was easier said than done. The tailed beasts had long been distributed by Senju Hashirama, making it nearly impossible for him to obtain one. As for the ones possessed by the great nations, he didn't dare entertain the thought of stealing them. Despite his reputation as the demigod of the shinobi world, Hanzo understood his limits. No matter how powerful he was, seizing a tailed beast from a great nation was a fool's errand. If he ever attempted such a thing and was discovered, his fate would be sealed. There was no chance of success. Thus, he turned his attention elsewhere. His first target had been Kigakur, the only non-great nation village in possession of a tailed beast. Hanzo and his forces meticulously planned their assault, intending to infiltrate and steal the beast. But every attempt ended in failure. Their elite shinobi were slaughtered by the very creature they sought to capture. Only then did Omega Corps truly grasp the horror of the tailed beasts and abandon their plans. Hanzo himself could not afford to make the attempt. If he personally led the mission, his identity would be exposed unless he wiped out the entirety of Kigakur, which was simply impossible. And if he was discovered, the 5 great nations would undoubtedly take action. They would never allow Omega Corps to gain a tailed beast and rise to power. Hanzo lived every day with this anxiety. The great nations saw him as a threat, and he constantly feared that they would send their elite assassins to eliminate him. Because of his strength, Omega Corps had become a significant force. But even so, Hanzo knew that if the 5 great nations joined forces, he would be powerless to stop them. In the original timeline, Hanzo's later years saw him lose faith in himself and his ideals. His once proud and unyielding spirit was broken, and he spent his days in seclusion, surrounded by bodyguards, fearing the inevitable assassination attempts. But right now, Hanzo still held firm to his beliefs. His pride remained unshaken. Even so, the sight of Jiraiya effortlessly defeating Tsunade Corps' tailed beast sent a deep shock through him. Once again, he found himself questioning the future of Omega Corps. Are we forever doomed to survive in the shadows of the great nations? Will Omega Corps never become a true power? Hanzo clenched his fists as these thoughts swirled in his mind. Now, with the emergence of Jiraiya, a rising star in the Fire Country leading Konoha's forces, the threat to Omega Corps had never been greater. Hanzo had originally believed that as long as the 5 great nations remained divided, Omega Corps would have a chance. Even if the combined forces of Tsunade Corps, Iwega Corps, and Konoha Corps attacked, he was confident in his ability to hold his ground. After all, the cage of each village needed to stay and protect their own lands, meaning they couldn't afford to personally lead the invasion. As long as no cage joined the battlefield, Hanzo believed he could turn the tide, proving Omega Corps' strength and forcing the great nations to acknowledge it as an equal. But things had changed. Jiraiya had already reached cage-level strength. Hanzo had never expected someone so young to achieve such power. It caught him completely off guard. With Jiraiya at their helm, Konoha's forces had gained a tremendous advantage. Hanzo was still confident he could defeat Jiraiya, but he also knew that Jiraiya could stall him long enough for Konoha's elite shinobi to overwhelm Omega Corps' forces. If Omega Corps fell, its future would be bleak. All of the village's young shinobi were within its walls. If Konoha breached their defenses, they would not show mercy. If Omega Corps' next generation was wiped out, the village would be doomed. Without young blood, Omega Corps would never recover. Konoha would never teach their children ninjutsu. The only chance for future generations to become shinobi would be if they were either raised in Konoha as its own or abandoned their hatred and willingly assimilated. Lord Hanzo, I never expected Jiraiya to be this powerful. He actually defeated Tsunade Corps' tailed beast. A high-ranking Omega Corps jonin spoke, still in awe of Jiraiya's strength. But then, a smirk crossed his face. This might actually work in our favor. The one tail is crucial to Tsunade Corps. Now that Jiraiya has sealed it, the Land of Wind will surely pressure the Fire Country to release it. The tailed beasts are too important. The Fire Country won't hand it over easily. If the situation escalates, a full-scale war between the 2 nations could break out. That would take a lot of pressure off us. The Jonin's analysis was sharp. There was no way Tsunade Corps would accept the loss of its tailed beast. Their land was barren, and their ability to cultivate top-tier shinobi was already far lower than the other great nations. Losing the one tail would be catastrophic. They would be at risk of falling from the status of a great nation. At the same time, Konoha would never willingly give up such a valuable asset. War between the Fire and Wind countries was now inevitable. If that happened, both nations would have no choice but to withdraw their forces from Omega Corps, leaving only Iwega Corps to deal with. The pressure on Omega Corps would decrease significantly, giving Hanzo the perfect opportunity to reclaim lost territory. Perhaps, Omega Corps' rise to power was not entirely out of reach after all. Chapter 192 Decision Don't be overly optimistic. The chances of a full-scale war breaking out between the Land of Wind and the Land of Fire are low, especially now that the Land of Wind has lost its tailed beast. They don't have the confidence to engage in an all-out war against the Land of Fire. Right now, the only cage-level ninja they have is the Kaze cage, while the Land of Fire has both Jiraiya and Hiruzen Sarutobi. They wouldn't dare to start a full-scale conflict. Besides, the other nations won't just stand by and watch as Konoha takes the Land of Wind's tailed beast for itself. They'll definitely pressure the Land of Fire into returning it. Of course, the Land of Wind will have to pay a price for that. Hanzo of the Salamander was far from optimistic. He shook his head as he spoke. If Omega Corps wanted to resolve its crisis, they had to rely on themselves. Expecting mercy from other nations was nothing more than a fool's dream. Right now, Omega Corps was nothing more than a piece of meat sitting between three hungry wolves. Thinking that they would give up such easy prey was pure fantasy. Unless, of course, this piece of meat grew fangs sharp enough to make the three great nations think twice before taking a bite. Only then could Omega Corps force them to retreat. Otherwise, trying to make them withdraw was as difficult as reaching the heavens. What Hanzo didn't know, however, was that Jiraiya hadn't just sealed Shikaku, he had killed it. Lord Hanzo, should we take this opportunity to ambush Jiraiya? He just finished fighting a tailed beast, he must be completely exhausted. If we seize this chance, we might be able to kill him here and now. If we eliminate Jiraiya, the dire situation we're facing could collapse in our favor. I refuse to believe that, after his death, the three great nations would be able to send another cage-level ninja to attack us, a veteran Omega Corps Jonin suggested eagerly. Jiraiya is still young, yet he already wields cage-level strength. On top of that, he's the Hokage's disciple. Most importantly, he has gained significant prestige among Konoha's shinobi. If we kill him, it will undoubtedly enrage Konoha. We could end up provoking the Land of Fire into retaliating with overwhelming force. The losses we suffer might be far greater than what we gain, another elite Omega Corps Jonin countered. Omega Corps was now divided into two factions, the pro-war faction and the surrender faction. The pro-war faction was determined to fight the three great nations to the bitter end, even if it meant annihilation. The surrender faction, on the other hand, advocated for negotiating with the Land of Fire. They were willing to cede significant resources in exchange for an end to the war. This would allow Omega Corps to rebuild its strength before eventually reclaiming what was lost. At the moment, the pro-war faction held the majority. They believed that surrendering resources in exchange for peace was nothing more than a slow death. To them, it was like cutting away flesh with a dull knife, painless at first, but fatal in the long run. If they gave up their resource points, they would lose the ability to cultivate new shinobi. Their nation's power would steadily decline. Meanwhile, the Land of Fire would only grow stronger with these resources, widening the gap between them even further. And once the Land of Fire had strengthened itself again, it would undoubtedly come for Omega Corps once more. Ambition never disappeared, it only slumbered until the opportunity arose again. Do you really think that sparing Jiraiya will make the Land of Fire go easy on us? Negotiating peace is nothing but self-delusion. We would rather die on our feet than live on our knees, a pro-war shinobi snapped furiously. Besides, if we kill Jiraiya now, we can also claim Shikaku. If we manage to control the tailed beast, Omega Corps will rise to power as a major nation. The Land of Wind deployed its tailed beast, only for Jiraiya to capture it. This is practically a gift from the heavens, another pro-war shinobi said, his excitement barely contained. Hanzo of the Salamander, do you have the courage to take me on? Standing atop a distant peak, Jiraiya called out with a smirk. Killing Shikaku hadn't cost him much chakra, so he wasn't the least bit afraid of fighting Hanzo now. If anything, he was eager to test the strength of the so-called demigod of the shinobi world. Frankly, Hanzo's reputation was somewhat exaggerated. His strength relied heavily on his summon, the Salamander, and his expertise in poison. If an opponent could counter those two advantages, Hanzo's strength might not even reach cage level. Arrogant brat. How dare you provoke us? Lord Hanzo, let's strike now. If we want to break free from this dire situation, eliminating Jiraiya is the first step. And on top of that, we can take Shikaku for ourselves. The pro-war Omega Corps shinobi continued urging Hanzo to take action. Killing Jiraiya now would indeed allow us to claim the tailed beast, but we have to consider the consequences. If we kill Jiraiya, we will have permanently severed any chance of reconciliation with the Land of Fire. If we keep Shikaku, we'll also make an enemy of the Land of Wind. More importantly, we currently have no means to control a tailed beast. Even if we capture it, we would need significant time to learn how to use its power. The Land of Wind won't give us that luxury. A surrender faction shinobi voiced his concerns once more. Things have reached the point of no return. We must push forward. Retreat is not an option anymore. If we compromise with the great nations again, we will lose our last chance to become a major power. Worse yet, in the future, we may be completely erased by them. Now that we have an opportunity to obtain a tailed beast, we cannot afford to waste it. We have already located many scattered survivors of the Uzumaki clan. They are under our secret surveillance. Once we obtain Shikaku, we will immediately capture those Uzumaki and force them to reveal their knowledge of sealing techniques. With those techniques, we can create our own Jinchuriki. There's no need to fear the Land of Wind's retaliation. As for the Kaze cage, I am confident in my ability to defeat him. After much hesitation, Hanzo finally made his decision to kill Jiraiya. Chapter 193 Hanzo of the Salamander killing Jiraiya would bring far greater benefits than drawbacks. Of course, doing so would plunge a Megakure into a dire crisis. The Land of Fire would retaliate with unrelenting fury. But even if they refrained from taking action against Jiraiya, the Land of Fire would not simply let a Megakure be. There was no reason to hesitate. Things couldn't possibly get worse than they already were. As for the threat posed by the Land of Wind should they take the tailed beast, Hanzo wasn't the least bit intimidated. If they stripped away external factors and pitted the Land of Wind against the Land of Rain in a direct confrontation, the Land of Wind wouldn't have the ability to wipe a Megakure out so easily. Killing Jiraiya now meant securing a tailed beast. While they wouldn't be able to control its power right away, simply possessing it would serve as a deterrent. An unsheathed blade, even if not yet wielded, commanded fear and respect. You all stay put. I will deal with Jiraiya personally, Hanzo ordered. Jiraiya's attacks were too overwhelming. In all of a Megakure, only Hanzo himself could withstand them. Any other aim nin caught in the crossfire would be annihilated instantly. In battles between cage-level shinobi, lower-ranked ninja were irrelevant. The same had been true when Hiruzen Sarutobi fought Orochimaru as elite Umbu could do nothing but watch. Against a shinobi of Jiraiya's caliber, ordinary ninja had no place. Please, my lord, be careful. If the situation turns against you, withdraw immediately. We must return to the village at all costs, one of the pro-peace aim nin pleaded, worried about what would happen if Hanzo fell. They hadn't wanted Hanzo to fight Jiraiya at all. But now that he had made up his mind, there was no stopping him. All they could do was urge him to take care. If Hanzo were to be injured or worse, a Megakure's future would be lost. Both the war faction and the peace faction of a Megakure relied on him as their leader. He was the backbone of the entire nation. Without Hanzo, they would have no strength to resist the oppression of the great nations. Shut up. Lord Hanzo will crush Jiraiya with ease. There's no need to worry about setbacks, one of the pro-war aim nin retorted. They had complete faith in Hanzo's victory. That was why they had always advocated for all-out war against the Land of Fire. Hanzo ignored their bickering. With a sudden burst of speed, he launched himself forward like a cannonball, streaking through the rain-swept battlefield toward Jiraiya. Jiraiya, seeing Hanzo approach, grinned and charged forward to meet him. I've always wondered if the title of demigod of the shinobi world is just an empty boast, Jiraiya said, his voice laced with challenge. The sharp sound of chains echoed through the rain. Hanzo swung his weapon, a peculiar combination of an axe and a scythe, connected by a long iron chain. With a flick of his wrist, the chain shot toward Jiraiya. Clang! Sparks flew as metal struck metal. Jiraiya had deflected the attack with his lightning flame blade, knocking the scythe away with a single stroke. Hanzo surged his chakra into his weapon, gripping the chain tightly. The axe and scythe whirled through the air as he swung them in unison, slashing toward Jiraiya with deadly precision. From the very first move, he attacked with lethal intent. His strikes created powerful shockwaves, distorting the air itself. A single flash, a decisive strike that determined victory or defeat. In the shinobi world, this was the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Though Hanzo's weapon was not a sword, his mastery of it made no difference. His technique was devastating all the same. Jiraiya felt a sharp, prickling sensation on his skin, an instinctive warning of danger. He took a deep breath, channeling chakra into his lightning flame blade. With a simple motion, he swung the blade forward in a seemingly effortless slash. It was a straightforward attack. No elaborate technique, no unnecessary movements. Just pure, concentrated power. But the chakra within the lightning flame blade roared to life. Energy surged and compressed within the blade before exploding outward, forming a massive, glowing arc of chakra. The chakra blade stretched over 10 meters in length. Boom! The clash sent shockwaves rippling across the battlefield. The impact was so intense that the earth trembled beneath them. For a moment, the two forces struggled against each other. Then, Hanzo's axe and scythe were forced back. At the same time, Jiraiya's chakra blade began to dissipate, the energies cancelling each other out. Jiraiya's technique was not refined, it relied purely on raw chakra output. Lady Tsunade, should we assist Jiraiya? He just finished sealing Shikaku, and now he's facing Hanzo. It's too dangerous, a Konoha shinobi asked urgently. That so-called demigod actually had to resort to a sneak attack, another muttered bitterly, watching the battle unfold. No, Tsunade replied firmly. This level of combat is beyond us. If we get too close, we'll just be throwing our lives away. Despite her concern for Jiraiya's safety, she knew they couldn't interfere. Hanzo retrieved his weapon, his expression unreadable. You will soon understand whether or not I am worthy of my title. He formed a series of hand seals, and a surge of water chakra erupted around him, merging with the storm clouds above. The already gloomy sky darkened further. What had been a light drizzle turned into a torrential downpour. Jiraiya's expression grew serious. Hanzo wasn't just a master of poisons, he was also a formidable taijutsu user and a water-style specialist. Rumor had it that his mastery of water release rivaled that of the second Hokage. Jiraiya couldn't say for certain whether that was true, but one thing was clear: Hanzo's water release was on an entirely different level. The battle was only beginning. Chapter 194, The Eight Gates Technique. Hanzo of the Salamander was the strongest ninja in a Megakure. In a land where rain was constant, it would be more surprising if he wasn't proficient in water release. With a thunderous roar, dark clouds churned above Hanzo's head. Torrents of water cascaded down, forming an immense tidal wave that surged toward Jiraiya with crushing force. The flood engulfed the battlefield, a deluge that seemed capable of swallowing the world whole. In Jiraiya's eyes, it was as if he had been cast adrift in an endless ocean, a lone leaf on the verge of being swallowed by the raging waters. A flood of this magnitude, it truly felt like the heavens themselves had unleashed it. Incredible water release, as expected of the so-called demigod of the shinobi world. From a distance, Isamu observed the spectacle with admiration. As a skilled water release user himself, he understood just how difficult it was to unleash a jutsu of this scale. Even with his strength as an elite jonin, Isamu knew that casting a technique of this caliber was beyond his reach. Water release means nothing against Jiraiya-sama. He's undefeated. Not even Hanzo, the so-called demigod, stands a chance against him. A Konoha shinobi shouted with conviction. Many of the Fire Country's shinobi had come to see Jiraiya as an almost divine figure, believing that no one in the world could best him. A technique of this scale, only our lord could achieve such mastery. Many claim that the second Hokage, Senju Tobirama, was the greatest water release user in history. That's nonsense. That title belongs to our lord. No one surpasses him in water release. Tobirama? He never truly mastered it. Water is deep, and only our lord can navigate its depths. A Megacore's shinobi spoke with fervent excitement, as if Jiraiya's defeat was already a foregone conclusion. Not bad. At least you didn't disappoint me. Jiraiya gazed at the oncoming torrents with an indifferent expression. Now this was the kind of jutsu one would expect from a true cage-level opponent. Storm Raiznan. With those words, he raised his right hand, forming a Raiznan infused with howling winds. Instead of striking Hanzo, Jiraiya tossed it above his head. The spiraling orb of wind spun furiously, generating a powerful updraft. As the massive waves approached, they were pulled into the vortex, spiraling around the Raiznan instead of crashing down. Without hesitation, Jiraiya conjured several more Storm Raiznan and scattered them around himself. Each one absorbed a portion of the flood, diverting the surging waters away from him. Hanzo's eyes narrowed slightly in surprise. He hadn't expected his technique to be neutralized so effortlessly. In an instant, his figure vanished, reappearing behind Jiraiya, a scythe in one hand and an axe in the other, both aiming for Jiraiya's neck and waist. You're fast, but your attack is too slow. Jiraiya swiftly unsheathed the lightning flame blade, slashing twice in quick succession. Sparks flew as the scythe and axe were cleaved apart. Hanzo's speed was impressive even with his heightened perception. Jiraiya had lost track of him for a full second. Without his enhanced vision, he wouldn't have been able to react in time, and those weapons would have carved into his flesh. Jiraiya, given time, you could surpass even Hashirama and become the new god of shinobi. But you lack patience. You shine too brightly, too soon. Like a comet, your brilliance will be short-lived. Hanzo's voice carried an unusual sense of regret as he praised his opponent. His respect was genuine. Senju Hashirama, the god of shinobi, was a legendary figure. Any shinobi who knew of him dreamed of reaching his heights. Even Hanzo himself had once aspired to be like him, but that dream was impossible. No matter how powerful he had become, Hanzo was still only a demigod. The gap between him and Hashirama was insurmountable, and he had long accepted that he would never reach those heights. Yet, in Jiraiya, he saw potential. Given time, Jiraiya could truly become a second Hashirama. There was no doubt in Hanzo's mind. A true genius has no need to hide his brilliance. Jiraiya's response was resolute. His muscles tensed, his body radiating raw power. 8 gates. Third gate, Gate of Life open. With a mighty roar, blue steam erupted from Jiraiya's body. His blood surged, and an overwhelming pressure radiated from him, shaking the battlefield. The 8 gates were the pinnacle of taijutsu. He had received this technique as a reward from the system, and he had since mastered it. With his current physique, he could even open the 8th gate, the Gate of Death. But against Hanzo, there was no need to go that far. The third gate, combined with his other abilities, was more than enough. In a blur, Jiraiya vanished. So fast. Hanzo's pupils shrank as he barely registered Jiraiya's movement. Without giving Hanzo time to react, Jiraiya raised his leg high and brought it down with devastating force. In that instant, he was like a falling mountain, ready to crush everything beneath him. The 8 gates didn't grant specific techniques, each user forged their own path. Might Guy had developed techniques like the Evening Elephant and Daytime Tiger, but they weren't part of the original 8 gates doctrine. The shinobi who created the 8 gates had never mastered all 8, so they had never devised specific techniques for each gate. Instead, every user had to innovate their own way of harnessing its power. And now, Jiraiya was doing just that. Chapter 195, A Powerful Attack. The Mountain Crash was a taijutsu technique developed by Jiraiya himself. By channeling all his strength into his leg and focusing it at a single point, he could unleash a devastating attack capable of inflicting severe damage in an instant. Water Dragon Rise. Hanzo's expression darkened as his hands flew through a rapid sequence of hand seals. Immediately, the falling raindrops around them converged into several massive water dragons that roared as they surged toward Jiraiya. But before the water dragons could reach him, they were shattered into a spray of mist by the sheer force of Mountain Crash, their remnants splashing uselessly onto the ground. Jiraiya's descending kick struck Hanzo square in the chest with tremendous force. Like a cannonball, Hanzo's body was sent hurtling backward, crashing into a distant hill with such force that a massive crater formed on impact. His chest caved inward, and blood seeped from beneath his mask. Hanzo had sustained a grievous injury. However, his physical resilience was leagues beyond that of ordinary shinobi. In addition to his formidable taijutsu, he had also transplanted the poison sac of a powerful giant salamander into his body. Not only did this sac allow him to generate a near-endless supply of deadly poison, but it also accelerated his healing process. Even with his ribs fractured, they were already knitting back together at an unnatural speed. What kind of technique was that? The speed and power behind it were unbelievable. Damn it, just how many more trump cards does Jiraiya have? He actually injured Lord Hanzo. Is it even possible for someone his age to be this strong? If even Lord Hanzo can't defeat him, then we have no hope at all. The sight of Hanzo being struck down sent a ripple of panic through the AIM shinobi watching from the sidelines. Many of them turned pale, their expressions betraying their fear. To them, Hanzo was more than just their leader, he was their pillar of strength. If he were to fall, at least half of Omegacore's forces would lose the will to fight. Calm yourselves. Lord Hanzo was merely caught off guard. You all know full well that he hasn't even begun to show his true power. A seasoned AIM jonin barked out, his voice cutting through the growing unease. Ridiculous. Do you seriously think Lord Hanzo would lose to some Konoha brat? Another battle-hardened AIM shinobi scoffed, his tone dripping with disdain. Unlike the wavering ones, the more experienced soldiers remained composed. They understood Hanzo's true strength. What they had seen so far was just the surface. Knew it. Jiraiya-sama is incredible. He's fighting the ninja demigod head-on and already landed a solid hit. With this battle, Jiraiya-sama's name will echo across the entire shinobi world. When he becomes Hokage, he'll surely lead Konoha to even greater heights. On the other side, the Konoha shinobi erupted in excitement. Injuring Hanzo, the man feared across the ninja world, was an unprecedented feat. Many believed his strength surpassed that of the 5 Kage, a claim that had gone unchallenged. The fact that no Kage had ever denied it only reinforced the belief that they lacked the power to do so. Now, Jiraiya had wounded the legend himself. The Konoha shinobi couldn't contain their elation. A remarkable taijutsu technique. However, it still falls short. If this is the extent of your power, you will not defeat me. Hanzo slowly pushed himself up from the rubble, his voice calm as he reached for his mask. The moment Jiraiya saw Hanzo remove it, he knew Hanzo was about to unleash his deadliest weapon, poison. Hanzo's infamous mask wasn't just for show. The poison sac implanted in his body continuously generated lethal toxins. Without his specialized mask, merely speaking would release a deadly miasma potent enough to kill anyone nearby. If he hadn't worn it all these years, Omegacore's own shinobi would have long since perished from exposure. You should have used poison from the start, Jiraiya said, unfazed. If you're relying on anything else, it's just not going to cut it. Poison didn't worry him. Thanks to his mastery of the universal poison seal, he was immune to every toxin in existence. No matter how potent the poison, all it would do was drain more of his chakra to counteract it. And if there was one thing he had in abundance, it was chakra. Ignoring Jiraiya's words, Hanzo's hands wove another intricate set of seals. The rain falling around them coalesced, forming a shimmering curtain of water that rapidly expanded into a sealed-off dome. Jiraiya observed the rapidly forming water barrier. He immediately recognized Hanzo's strategy. By enclosing the battlefield, he was maximizing the effectiveness of his poison. Without hesitation, Hanzo exhaled a thick cloud of purple venom into the swirling water. The moment the poison mixed in, the once clear liquid took on a deep violet hue. As the toxic water surged toward him, Jiraiya noticed that even the ground sizzled upon contact, leaving behind gaping holes where the poison had eaten through. Spiral Blast Fist. Facing the incoming tide, Jiraiya clenched his right fist and pulled back, forming a compact Rasengan around his knuckles. This was another one of his own innovations, a seamless fusion of taijutsu and the Rasengan's devastating power. The moment the venomous tide reached him, he struck out with full force. A shockwave erupted from his punch, sending the toxic water flying backward in all directions. But then a burning sensation. Jiraiya looked down at his exposed skin. Red blotches had already begun to spread across his arms, the skin searing as if pressed against a hot iron. Damn, that's some potent stuff. The realization struck him he had inhaled more of the poison than he thought. His skin felt like it was melting, the pain almost unbearable. My poison has no cure. Hanzo's lips curled into a knowing smile as he watched the red mark spread across Jiraiya's body. They call me the ninja demigod not just for my strength, but because of my poison. Without it, I'd be no different from any other cage-level ninja. But with it, there is no equal. The best light novels are waiting for you here. Don't miss out. Subscribe on Infinite Novel now. This universe grows with every follower. Are you part of Infinite Novel yet? Chapter 196. Standing shoulder to shoulder with the gods, Hanzo of the Salamander had absolute confidence in his poison. Now that Jiraiya had been exposed to it, even if it didn't take his life immediately, it would severely weaken him. His poison was incurable. Even he had no antidote for it. In other words, once poisoned, the best case scenario was losing half your life. He was called the demigod of the shinobi world because others feared his poison. No one had ever found a way to neutralize it, which solidified his reputation. If the cage-level shinobi of the 5 great nations had a means to counter his poison, they would have banded together to eliminate him long ago. There was no way they would have allowed him to continue leading Omegacore unchallenged. That being said, if the 5 Kage truly went all out in a life-or-death battle against him, even if they couldn't cure his poison, they could still take him down in a mutually destructive exchange. Your poison is strong, no doubt, Jiraiya said, shaking his head. but if I really want to purge it, it's not that difficult. Pressing his hands together, he activated the universal poison seal, a technique that sent his chakra surging through his body, isolating and expelling the venom. The reddish blotches on his skin quickly faded. How is this possible? Hanzo's voice cracked with disbelief. Jiraiya had just neutralized his poison. Ever since he had implanted the poison sac of a salamander in his youth, his resistance to toxins had been unparalleled. He consumed poisons daily to strengthen his venom. The toxins he exhaled were so potent that even he couldn't formulate an antidote. Yet Jiraiya had cleansed himself of it. Hanzo couldn't accept it. If Jiraiya had mastered a method to counteract his poison and spread it to others, his greatest advantage over cage-level opponents would be nullified. Hanzo was a top-tier powerhouse among cage-level shinobi, but without his poison, he would be reduced to an ordinary cage-level combatant. For the first time, he felt a tinge of fear. His greatest weapon had been countered. His trump card, rendered useless. How could he not be shaken? At that moment, Hanzo made up his mind Jiraiya had to die. No matter what, he couldn't be allowed to leave alive. Jiraiya actually neutralized Lord Hanzo's poison? How did he do that? The poison Lord Hanzo produces is so potent that even he cannot create an antidote. How could Jiraiya counter it? The shinobi of Omegakure were in shock. For years, their village had conducted extensive research to counteract Hanzo's poison, but all efforts had been fruitless. His venom was an ever-evolving mixture of countless toxins, enhanced daily through his regimen. Yet Jiraiya had simply dispelled it. They struggled to believe their own eyes. Summoning jutsu. Hanzo bit his thumb and slammed his palm to the ground. A massive salamander burst forth from the earth, and he swiftly leaped onto its head. Jiraiya, I don't know how you managed to resist my poison, Hanzo said coldly, but let me make one thing clear: you cannot escape it entirely. This entire barrier is now saturated with my toxin. The longer you remain, the more poison you inhale. If you surrender now, I may consider sparing your life. At his command, the enormous salamander spewed a dense, toxic mist, spreading it throughout the enclosed battlefield. Jiraiya's body, which had just been cleansed, once again developed red blotches. The salamander's poison, combined with Hanzo's exhaled toxins, caused the poison levels in the barrier to spike dramatically. However, Jiraiya activated the universal poison seal once more, resisting the effects. The blotches on his skin flickered in and out of existence as his body fought to maintain equilibrium. Surrender? Jiraiya scoffed. You're not worthy. In a flash, he created a massive number of shadow clones, over 100 in total. Myriad Thunder Prison, Super Giant Raiznon, Storm Raiznon, Lightning Surge Raiznon, Earthquake Raiznon, Raging Waters Raiznon, Blazing Fire Raiznon. Each of Jiraiya's clones unleashed a devastating jutsu, hurling them at Hanzo. The sheer power of the attacks was overwhelming. This is impossible. How does he have so much chakra? Hanzo was aghast as a barrage of jutsu bore down on him. Jiraiya had already expended a great deal of chakra fighting Shikaku. How could he still unleash such an onslaught? Sage Art Gomen. Jiraiya, aided by two of his clones, activated a powerful sage technique. A tidal wave of searing oil and fire surged forward, incinerating everything in its path. Sage Art Thousand Hair Needles. Sage Art Super Giant Thunderstorm Raiznon. Sage Art Heavenly Thunderfall. Sage Art Torrential Waters. One after another, Jiraiya's clones unleashed mighty sage techniques. He had no intention of prolonging the fight. Hanzo was undeniably formidable. If this battle dragged on, the accumulated poison would eventually overwhelm even the universal poison seal. The ground trembled as an ear-splitting explosion rocked the battlefield. The sheer force of the attack shattered Hanzo's barrier. His chakra, it's beyond monstrous. This is even more terrifying than a tailed beast. Is this really the power of a shinobi? This is no mere man. This is a god. Run! We need to get out of here. Not even Lord Hanzo can survive this. He may be called a demigod, but in the end, he is still just a man. The shinobi of Omegakure looked on in horror as their leader was swallowed by the devastating attacks. One by one, they collapsed in terror, unable to comprehend the overwhelming power before them. Jiraiya, he truly is the god of the shinobi world. Chapter 197, Kill Boom. Thunderous explosions echoed through the battlefield as terrifying shockwaves spread in all directions, distorting the very air. Everything caught in the blast radius was instantly reduced to dust. Jiraiya unleashed a series of devastating attacks, nearly depleting his chakra reserves in the process. However, his natural recovery was remarkable. His cells rapidly divided, producing fresh chakra to replenish what had been drained. In mere moments, he had already regained 30% of his chakra. As the aftershocks subsided, the ground where Hanzo had once stood was now a massive crater. Kneeling within the pit, Hanzo gasped for breath. His trusted summon, the giant salamander, was nowhere to be seen, blown to bits by Jiraiya's assault. Despite its immense power, the beast had served no purpose in this battle, falling in an instant. Hanzo himself was gravely injured, his aura weak and unstable. While Jiraiya's relentless barrage had failed to end his life, it had left him in a dire state, his strength drastically diminished. Truthfully, had it not been for his summon absorbing the brunt of the attack, he would likely be dead. Now, barely clinging to life, Hanzo's mind raced with shock and disbelief. He struggled to understand how Jiraiya's chakra reserves could be so vast. Could it be Does he possess the same legendary body as Hashirama Senju? The thought sent a chill down his spine. The name of Hashirama Senju, the god of shinobi, was spoken in awe across the ninja world. His chakra was said to be boundless, capable of suppressing even the 9 tails with a single hand. Realizing the terrifying possibility before him, Hanzo gritted his teeth and forced his battered body to retreat. He no longer had the courage to continue this fight. If Jiraiya truly possessed a chakra reserve comparable to Hashirama's, then victory was impossible. With his injuries, survival was now his only priority. I can't die here. If I fall, the land of rain is doomed. Hanzo knew he was no longer Jiraiya's match, but if he could make it back to the village, he could rely on its fortifications to hold him at bay. Jiraiya watched as the legendary Hanzo fled, a smirk forming at the corner of his lips. Still quick to run when things go south, huh? Lord Hanzo lost. It's over. It's all over. We have no hope left. The future of the land of rain is finished. What do we do? What do we do now? Even Lord Hanzo was defeated. Seeing their leader in full retreat, the rain shinobi collapsed to their knees, eyes filled with despair. Hanzo had been their pillar of strength, their unwavering shield against outside forces. Now, with him defeated, it felt as if their entire world had crumbled. Regardless of whether they supported surrender or war, in this moment, they all felt the same fear creeping into their hearts. Meanwhile, the shinobi of the Land of Fire, momentarily stunned by Jiraiya's overwhelming power, erupted into triumphant cheers. Jiraiya-sama actually did it. He took down Hanzo, the so-called demigod. Hanzo has ruled as one of the strongest shinobi in the world, but Jiraiya-sama just crushed him like it was nothing. Doesn't that mean Jiraiya-sama is the new demigod of the ninja world? What are you talking about? Jiraiya-sama is still young, and he's already this powerful. The title of demigod isn't enough, he's going to be the next god of shinobi. Tsunade, who had been anxiously watching the battle, finally exhaled in relief. A smile spread across her face as the tension in her heart eased. She had been deeply worried for Jiraiya, afraid that he might not be able to match Hanzo and that he might lose his life in the battle. But now, seeing his overwhelming victory, she could finally relax. It's too late to run now. Jiraiya's figure blurred as he shot forward, relentlessly pursuing Hanzo. With his chakra almost fully recovered, and Hanzo already grievously injured, Jiraiya wasn't about to let him escape. Killing Hanzo here and now would send a message to the entire ninja world. If I want to unify the shinobi world, Hanzo could be a valuable subordinate. But even if he's defeated, making him submit won't be easy. The pride of a so-called demigod won't allow it. Stop him. Now! Seeing Jiraiya closing in, Hanzo roared at his remaining forces. Without hesitation, the elite Jonin of the Land of Rain sprang into action, charging at Jiraiya in unison. Though shaken by Hanzo's defeat, they still placed their trust in him. Their country's future depended on his survival. They're willing to die for him. Jiraiya noted their determination but remained unfazed. A colossal Raiznan formed in his palm, its violent winds howling as it surged forward. The rain shinobi desperately unleashed jutsu to counter it, but their techniques were obliterated instantly. One by one, they were caught in the blast, their bodies crushed into the ground, reduced to nothing but unrecognizable remains. Jiraiya pushed forward without pause, hands flashing through a rapid series of seals. Adamantine sealing chains. Golden chains burst from his body, twisting through the air like living dragons before lashing out at Hanzo. Hanzo's expression darkened. He had seen Jiraiya use this technique before, strong enough to suppress even Shikaku. If those chains wrapped around him, he would be doomed. With a final desperate effort, he unleashed a powerful water release technique, sending a massive tidal wave crashing toward Jiraiya. Jiraiya swung the lightning flame blade, unleashing a blinding arc of chakra-infused light. The slash cleaved through the tidal wave in an instant, splitting it apart as if it were nothing more than mist. Before Hanzo could react, the golden chains ensnared him, wrapping tightly around his limbs. Glowing seals spread across his body as his chakra was forcefully suppressed. The so-called demigod of the ninja world had been completely bound, unable to move, unable to resist. Jiraiya, if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. Hanzo roared, his voice filled with desperate rage. Chapter 198. Unbelievable. As soon as Hanzo of the Salamander finished speaking, a thick cloud of purple mist erupted from his body, surging toward Jiraiya like a tidal wave. At the same time, Hanzo's body began to decay rapidly, dissolving into a pool of toxic sludge within moments. The man once revered as the demigod of the shinobi world had fallen. Hanzo knew there was no chance of survival, so in his final moments, he detonated the poison sac implanted within him. He had carried it since his youth, and over the years, it had accumulated an immense amount of venom. Now, he unleashed it all in one final act so potent that even his own body could not withstand it. Watching Hanzo end his life this way, Jiraiya couldn't help but feel a measure of respect for the man. At the very least, he had lived and died without tarnishing his title. He neither begged for mercy nor lowered himself in the face of death. The toxic mist spread rapidly, but Jiraiya remained unfazed. He retrieved a storage scroll and pulled out a jet-black gourd. Infusing it with chakra, he activated its power. The gourd released an overwhelming suction force, effortlessly absorbing the deadly poison into its depths. Hanzo's desperate final gambit had failed to harm Jiraiya in the slightest. The gourd in Jiraiya's hands was no ordinary item, it was a treasure he had obtained through his sign-in ability, capable of absorbing and sealing any toxic substance. Should he ever need it, he could release the poison back into the world at will. Its name was simple yet fitting: the Sealing Poison Gourd. With Hanzo dead, the remaining AIM ninja immediately lost their will to fight and fled in a frenzy. Jiraiya watched them retreat but chose not to pursue. With Hanzo gone, a Megacore no longer had the strength to resist the Land of Fire. Conquering the country was now just a matter of time. Sealing away Shikaku had been the key to drawing Hanzo out, and while Jiraiya had anticipated a confrontation, even he hadn't expected to successfully kill the legendary shinobi. Before this battle, Hanzo had been extremely cautious, refusing to leave the safety of a Megacore even when Jiraiya led an army to its very doorstep. The village, after all, had been fortified under Hanzo's rule for decades, making it an impenetrable stronghold. Had Hanzo remained inside, Jiraiya would have had no immediate way to deal with him. But with his death and the AIM forces now in disarray, Jiraiya knew it wouldn't be long before the remaining ninjas surrendered. Even if some stubbornly held their ground, their dwindling numbers would only make them easier to crush. The Land of Fire's eventual victory was inevitable. "Jiraiya-sama, should we press the attack and take a Megacore while they're in disarray?" Isamu asked, his tone eager. With Hanzo dead, the village's defenses were likely in shambles. This was the perfect opportunity to strike. "No need to rush," Jiraiya replied, shaking his head. "For now, take your forces and surround a Megacore. I'll return to the village and bring reinforcements." Even with Hanzo gone, storming the village with our current numbers would be costly. Isamu nodded in understanding. Jiraiya's decision was sound. Although Jiraiya alone had the power to flatten a Megacore, doing so would destroy valuable resources and structures in the process. Unless absolutely necessary, he wanted to avoid such a drastic measure. "Understood." Isamu bowed respectfully. After issuing a few more orders, Jiraiya set off for Konohagakure. With Hanzo dead, he was now in a position to convince the village's higher UPS to fully support his mission to unify the shinobi world. If they refused, he had his own ways of silencing opposition. "What? Shukaku has been sealed by Jiraiya." At Tsunagakure in the Land of Wind, the shocking news had just reached the ears of the village's leaders. Panic immediately spread among the upper echelons. They had never anticipated such a disastrous turn of events when they sent Shukaku to the battlefield. "I told you from the start Shukaku should never have left the village. He should have remained under our control. But no, you insisted on sending Bunpyaku with him. And now look what's happened. Shukaku is sealed, and our military strength has plummeted. Not only have we gained nothing in AIM, but we've also made ourselves vulnerable to attacks on our homeland." An elder slammed his fist on the table, his voice full of regret and frustration. "This isn't the time for blame," another council member interjected. "What's done is done. The real issue now is finding a way to reclaim Shukaku. If we lose him permanently, we'll no longer be able to hold our place among the great nations." Jiraiya's power is terrifying. He has risen to prominence in just 6 months, yet he was able to seal Shukaku on his own. Not only that, another elder added grimly, but let's not forget Hiruzen Sarutobi is still alive and remains a formidable force. With Shukaku in their hands, our chances of reclaiming him are slim at best. "Kazekage-sama, we have urgent news from the front lines." As the council debated, a panicked Suna ninja burst into the chamber, delivering yet another shocking report. "Jiraiya has killed Hanzo of the Salamander." The entire room fell into stunned silence. "What did you say?" The Kazekage shot up from his seat, his expression one of utter disbelief. "You're telling me Hanzo is dead? Killed by Jiraiya? Is this some kind of mistake?" another elder asked in disbelief. Hanzo had been a force to be reckoned with for years. His name alone struck fear across the shinobi world. The idea that he had fallen to Jiraiya, a single ninja, was almost too much to accept. "The report is accurate," the messenger confirmed. "Jiraiya killed Hanzo without suffering a single injury." The weight of the words hung in the air, sending chills down the spines of everyone present. Jiraiya's rise was no longer something they could ignore. The balance of power in the shinobi world was shifting and fast. Chapter 199 Why? Unscathed, and he killed Hanzo the Salamander? The Kazekige's voice trembled with disbelief. Hanzo had earned his reputation as a demigod not just because of his skill but because of his lethal poison. Tsunagakure had its own expertise in poisons, but compared to Hanzo's mastery, theirs was child's play. When they first heard that Jiraiya had defeated Hanzo, they had already found it hard to accept. But now, learning that Jiraiya had emerged completely unscathed, that sent shockwaves through the room. "I never expected the Land of Fire to produce such a prodigy," the Kazekage muttered, sinking back into his chair, his expression unreadable. "If Jiraiya is this powerful, recovering Shukaku will be even more difficult, perhaps even impossible." One of the elders said, his voice laced with frustration. Tsunagakure was already the weakest among the 5 great nations. Now, with the emergence of a new cage-level powerhouse in Konoha, their situation had worsened. The Land of Fire was already strong, and now with Shukaku in their possession, their power will only grow. The other great nations won't allow this to happen. "Shukaku will return to us, but the cost will be immense," another senior council member added with a shake of his head. "No matter the cost, we must reclaim Shukaku. It is the foundation of our nation's strength. Without it, Tsunagakure will lose its standing as a great power." A weighty silence filled the room before another elder spoke, his voice firm. Shukaku was too important. If Tsunagakure had multiple cage-level ninjas, perhaps even one beyond that level, then they wouldn't need to rely on a tailed beast. But they didn't. And that was the problem. If they had that kind of strength, Jiraiya would never have been able to take Shikaku in the first place. Regardless, we must get Shikaku back. You will leave for the Land of Fire immediately and negotiate. If their demands are not excessive, you have the authority to accept them on my behalf. The Kazekage turned to one of the elders, his expression serious. There was no time to waste. The longer Shikaku remained in Konoha's hands, the harder it would be to reclaim him. If the Kazekage could have left the village himself, he would have gone personally. Understood, Kazekage-sama. I will depart at once. The elder stood and bowed before swiftly exiting the council chamber. He knew the gravity of this mission. Every second counted. Kazekage-sama, our borders with the Land of Fire are vast. The stronger they become, the greater the threat to us. We must seek allies immediately, or Tsunade could face annihilation. Another elder's warning cut through the tense atmosphere. He wasn't wrong. Strength bred ambition. With Tsunade's long border with the Land of Fire and its inferior military might, it was only a matter of time before Konoha's more aggressive factions sought to expand their influence. Even if they recovered Shikaku, they would still be no match for Konoha. You will leave for the Land of Earth immediately and inform the Tsuchikage of our situation. He will understand the importance of an alliance. However, we must be prepared to make concessions. The Kazekage issued his next order without hesitation. The Land of Earth was their best option. If Konoha moved against Tsunade, Uegakure would not sit idly by. They understood the principle of mutual survival. If Tsunade fell, the Land of Fire would only grow stronger, and Uegakure would be next. Hasty action will make us look desperate. The Tsuchikage will take advantage of our position and demand a heavy price for his support. Perhaps it would be wiser to wait until Konoha makes its move before seeking an alliance. One of the elders voiced his concern. If we wait, we will be even more at their mercy. The Tsuchikage's demands will only increase. Now is the time to negotiate while we still have some leverage. The Kazekage shook his head, unconvinced. Issue an immediate recall order to all forces stationed in Omegakure. We can no longer afford to maintain our presence there. With that, the Kazekage delivered his final command. Tsunade could not afford to be spread thin. They had to consolidate their strength and prepare for whatever came next. Sensei, we've pushed deep into Omegakure's territory, and our victories keep piling up. We're at the doorstep of the Rain Ninja Village. I request permission to send reinforcements and seize their stronghold. Jiraiya stood before Hiruzen Sarutobi in the Hokage's office, his tone resolute. Expanding the war further will cost us more men, but if we take their main village, we'll control Omegakure's resources completely. The determination in his voice was clear. Hiruzen exhaled a cloud of smoke before responding. No, Jiraiya. We will not escalate the war any further. The reason our forces have advanced so easily is that Hanzo has yet to take action. If we continue pressing forward, we will inevitably provoke him, and if he personally enters the battle, our losses will be catastrophic. Hiruzen's voice was firm. Even I am not confident I could defeat Hanzo. We've already seized a significant portion of Omegakure's resources. This is our chance to negotiate from a position of strength and bring this war to an end. Jiraiya frowned but said nothing. He knew his sensei had a point, but something still felt off. When you return, I want you to lead the negotiations with Hanzo. Hiruzen took another slow drag from his pipe. He was satisfied with their current position. Konoha had gained enough from this war. It was time to consolidate their advantages and move forward. Sensei, negotiations with Hanzo are no longer an option. Jiraiya shook his head, his expression grim. Hiruzen's brow furrowed. And why is that? According to his calculations, they had backed Hanzo into a corner. By offering peace and returning some of the captured resources, Hanzo should have been willing to negotiate. He might have even ceded additional land to Konoha in exchange for ending the war. But if Jiraiya was saying that negotiations were no longer possible, then something had changed, and that was cause for concern. Chapter 200 No more pretending, time to reveal everything. Hiruzen Sarutobi had never intended to fully occupy Omegakure. With Hanzo the Salamander still alive, no nation could ever truly conquer Omegakure. At most, they could seize some of its territory, because Hanzo was simply too powerful. Hanzo the Salamander is already dead. I killed him. Jiraiya spoke calmly as he met Hiruzen's gaze. What did you just say? Hiruzen's pupils contracted, his pipe slipping from his fingers. Every movement betrayed the sheer shock he felt at the revelation. Hanzo is dead. I also eliminated the Wind Country's Jinchuriki, and I have already sealed Shikaku. Jiraiya's voice remained indifferent. How did you accomplish this? Hiruzen could no longer control his expression, his face filled with disbelief. Sensei, I did it with my own strength. Now that Hanzo is gone, we have the power to completely wipe out Omegakure's shinobi and take full control of their land. Jiraiya's response was firm. A storm raged in Hiruzen's mind as he struggled to process Jiraiya's words. How had Jiraiya grown so powerful in just 6 months? Defeating Hanzo single-handedly was already unbelievable, but sealing a tailed beast as well? It felt like a dream. Without hesitation, Hiruzen immediately gathered Konoha's senior leadership. 13 individuals sat before him, men and women who held the highest authority in Konoha. Very few were from civilian backgrounds, most were the heads of prominent clans or influential elders. Hiruzen relayed Jiraiya's accomplishments to them. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Lord Hokage, is this true? Hanzo the Salamander has really been killed? Koharu Yuditen finally broke the silence, still struggling to believe it. The other shinobi wore similar expressions of shock. Hanzo had dominated the shinobi world for decades, and now they were being told out of nowhere that he was dead? And that Jiraiya, one of their own, had killed him? Jiraiya wasn't even 16 yet. How could someone so young defeat the so-called demigod of the ninja world? There's no need for your skepticism. Jiraiya's voice was cold as he observed their reactions. Hanzo is dead. If you don't believe me, you're free to verify it on the front lines. Sensei, now is the perfect opportunity to take a Megakure. Mobilize our forces immediately. Let me lead the final assault and claim their territory once and for all. If we fully occupy a Megakure, Konoha's strength will surge beyond all other great nations. Jiraiya turned to Hiruzen, his tone firm. Erasing a Megakure would have serious consequences, Hiruzen replied, shaking his head. The other great nations won't just stand by and let us do this. We must tread carefully. Even with Hanzo dead and a Megakure leaderless, Hiruzen remained cautious. Because if Konoha annihilated a Megakure's shinobi and seized their land, the other great nations would undoubtedly turn their attention toward the Land of Fire. It could provoke a multi-front war. Exactly. The Land of Fire is already the strongest of the 5 nations. If we seize another country's territory and claim its resources, the other nations will never let us be. They'll target us relentlessly. Koharu nodded in agreement. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes as another council member prepared to speak. I don't care what any of you say. I will destroy a Megakure. If we allow their shinobi to live, they will bear an eternal grudge against us. Jiraiya's voice turned icy. And if the other great nations secretly aid a Megakure and help them recover, they will become a dagger aimed at Konoha's throat. I will not allow that to happen. You fear the pressure of the other great nations, I understand. But they are not a united front. They will not work together against us. As long as they remain divided, none of them are strong enough to challenge Konoha. His words carried unwavering determination. Jiraiya, mind your tone. Are you saying you would defy Lord Hokichi's orders? Homura Mito Kato barked, his voice laced with anger. I don't intend to defy anyone, but if someone tries to hold Konoha back, if they stand in the way of our village's rise to power, I will not tolerate it. Jiraiya's expression turned cold. If the elders refused to support him, he would take matters into his own hands. If necessary, he would stage a coup and purge Konoha of its rigid traditionalists. Jiraiya, what are you implying? Are you suggesting that Lord Hokichi's decisions are hindering the village's growth? Homura's face darkened as he glared at Jiraiya. Enough. Hiruzen cut in before the tension could escalate further. Jiraiya, where have you sealed Shikaku? Is the seal secure? Should we send the sealing corps to reinforce it to prevent any accidents? Though Jiraiya's words had irked him, Hiruzen refrained from rebuking him, because Jiraiya's strength was now on par with his own. More importantly, he didn't want to create a rift between them. If their ideological divide continued to widen, it could destabilize the village. Later, he planned to have a private conversation with Jiraiya to explain the dangers that war could bring to Konoha. He understood Jiraiya's mentality. Such power at such a young age, of course, he would have ambitions. Lord Hokichi, Shikaku is sealed securely. Jiraiya shook his head. He had killed Hanzo, yet Hiruzen still refused to launch a full-scale invasion of a Megakure. The frustration within him was already boiling over. He no longer felt the need to address Hiruzen as sensei. He knew that with Hanzo's death, his own reputation would spread across the shinobi world. The other great nations would fear him. Now was the perfect moment for Konoha to seize control of a Megakure. The other nations might not like it, but they wouldn't be able to stop it either. The best light novels are waiting for you here. Don't miss out. Subscribe on Infinite Novel now. This universe grows with every follower. Are you part of Infinite Novel yet?